So we're going to look at how we can provide a safe and appropriate activity programme. If you've got a child or a student or client with profound and complex needs, then you need to liaise with other professionals, maybe the physiotherapist, the occupational therapist, and see how you can complement their existing programmes and get their input and develop a programme, using their expertise. But for most of your students who are a little bit more able, you actually have a safe and appropriate activity programme. Grades 1, 2 and 3 of the Winstrada Trampoline Development Programme are based entirely on this training course. So just by using that, you're recapping on the course and everything is laid out in a methodical fashion. And you can measure and record their progress on the sheets in two different ways. One of two different ways, depending on the needs of the student. So this is where I get to tell you about the Huddersfield Functional Index. So could you first of all turn to page 16. So first of all, we're going to look at how we use the Winstrada Development Programme in the conventional manner. So we're on page 16 of the Huddersfield Functional Index manual. So all the children's names are written in the vertical columns, and every time they pass a move, you give them a tick, or you might prefer to write the date, that's up to you. And when they've got the required number of passes, you can say they've completed that grade, and you can give them their badge and certificate. So that's very simple and straightforward, isn't it? I think most people are familiar with that type of record keeping. Does that sound reasonable to you? And that's fine for your more able students. It's not so great for those with more complex needs, because you're either giving them a tick or nothing. And they might have worked for weeks and weeks on a range of exercises and made some progress, but not enough progress to get a tick, so there's no way of measuring and recording that progress. So for students with more complex needs who wouldn't necessarily be able to get ticks, or maybe not be able to get very many ticks, we can use the same programme, but with the Huddersfield Functional Index. So could you please turn to page 22. So this is the same development programme. This is actually grade 1 of it. But Jonathan Smythe is a student with more complex needs, so he's got a sheet all to himself. The figures at the top are simply the dates of the sessions. So it started on the 22nd of April. Can you all see that? The figures underneath are the numbers of the exercises that the teacher has chosen to work on. So she's chosen to work on 1, 6, 11 and 15. So she's chosen to work on 4 exercises a week. Doesn't have to be 4, could be 5, could be 1. You'll make that call. You'll know your student well enough to know how many exercises a week he could work on. But she's chosen 1 exercise from each section, because every section in grade 1 has a theme. Section A is about accepting and tolerating, beginning to develop a little bit of an understanding. Section B is developing more of an understanding, differentiating between stillness and movement, cause and effect, that sort of thing. Section C is when they're beginning to get more physically active, and they're all kneeling exercises. Section D are all sitting exercises, and Section E are all standing exercises. So it's okay to do 1 exercise from each section, but within each section you would work methodically through. You'd work it from the first one and work methodically through, because everything is a progression for the next thing. Yeah? So she's chosen to work on these 4 exercises, 1, 6, 11 and 15. So we're only looking at the 22nd of April. So you can see that for exercise number 1, he scored a 4. Can you see that? So his total score, it's in the box at the bottom, for section A on the 22nd of April. Can you all see that? On the facing page, these are the indicators. This is how we get to give him the score. So I'll come back to that, okay? I'll give you a very quick overview, and then we'll come back and look at how we get to give them the scores. So if you turn the page, on section B, exercise number 6, you see he scored a 3. You see that? So his total score for section B on the 22nd of April is 3. Yeah? And for exercise number 11, he scored a 1. So his total score for section C on the 22nd of April is 1. If you turn the page again, exercise number 15, he scored a 4. You all with me so far? Mm-hmm. So his total score for section D on the 22nd of April was 4. Yeah? If you turn the page again, you'll see that the teacher's drawn a line straight through the page. And she's written at the top, unable to attempt standing. Section E are all standing exercises. So if he's unable to attempt standing, no point in doing that section. So she just put a line through, that's fine. But at the bottom of the page, she's totaled the scores from every other section. So can you see what the total score for the 22nd of April is?
12.
12, yeah. If you turn the page again, get to a graph. And you can see that for the 22nd of April, the 12 has been plotted on the graph. Can you see that? The following week, he did a little bit better. He scored 13, so that's plotted on the graph and a line drawn. And so on, and so on, and so on. So the graph gives you a very quick visual record of his overall progress. It doesn't tell you very much at all. It just tells you whether he's making progress or not. And you can see that Jonathan, on the whole, is making progress, but there are 2 weeks where he plateaued. Can you see that? But generally he's making progress because the line is going up. But that's all it tells you. Whereas the sheets themselves tell you what he's working on and how he's progressing from week to week, if the numbers are going up or not, and on the facing page, what he had to do in order to get those scores. That makes sense so far?
Yeah.
So now we're going to have a look at how you get to give him the scores. So if you turn to page 26, this is an exercise you'll all be familiar with. Exercise number 20, sitting position, swimming arm movements to initiate bounce. Do you all remember that? Swimming arms to bounce? Yeah. And on the facing page, you can see what the indicators are in order to give them the scores. So exercise 20 is the bottom. See that? So 0 is no interest whatsoever, or refuses to do the exercise, or is simply completely unable to do it even with full support. Whereas 4 is equivalent to a tick, is able to independently complete the exercise. So you've got 3 scores between those 2 parameters that enable you to accurately measure and record his progress. So maybe the first week, he really doesn't want to know, and you've got to give him a 0. So the description for that, this particular exercise, is makes no attempt to initiate movement, refuses or is unable to make any attempt to initiate movement, even when given full support and assistance by carers. So you've got to give him a 0. He absolutely doesn't want to know, or is flatly refusing, so you've got to give him a 0. So this week, when you're running the session, or maybe I'm coming in to cover for you, it doesn't matter. You can clearly see what a realistic target for this week is going to be. What would a realistic target be for this week when last week he scored a 0? 1. It wouldn't be realistic to try and get him to do a 4, which is equivalent to a tick, when last week he was refusing. Yeah? So our target for this week is to get it up to 1. Yeah? And the description for that is will allow carers to assist. With full support of carers, will occasionally attempt to initiate some movement. Nothing like a tick, is it? But it has enabled you to measure and record a little bit of progress, which you wouldn't be able to do in the conventional system of giving them ticks. Does that make sense? So obviously next week, we're going to try and get him up to the score of 2 if we possibly can. And the description for a score of 2 is makes a recognisable attempt. With minimal support from carers, we'll make a recognisable attempt to initiate some movement by swimming arms. So again, nothing like a tick, but you've now been enabled to measure and record some progress from 0 through 1 to 2. And he may never get any further than that, and that's fine. You've still been able to measure that progress, which you couldn't have done with the conventional tick system. Yeah? By the way, do you think this is a recognisable attempt to initiate movement by swimming arms? I'm your student, okay? Do you think it might be? Well, it might be. You know your student. Is that just something he does anyway, or do you think he was definitely trying to initiate some movement by swinging his arms? If he was, then that would be worth a 2, wouldn't it? It was a recognisable attempt to initiate some movement by swinging arms, yeah? Because it might be that he just flaps his arms anyway, but this particular student, maybe he doesn't do that, and that does appear to be a recognisable attempt to initiate movement. Do you see what I mean? So it also needs some knowledge of the student as well. Yeah? Obviously, you'd try and get him up to a 3 if you possibly could, ideally up to a 4, but you may never get any further than 2. If you can't, that's fine. A couple of other things I need to point out to you. Could you turn to page 24? Quite a good example here. Exercise number 11. Can you see that the first week he scored a 1, and he didn't make any progress the second week, he scored a 1 again, and then a 2, and then a 3, and then he really got it, didn't he? He scored a 4 for 3 consecutive weeks. So the teacher has decided, well, no point in carrying on with that. He's got that, draw a line, move on to the next exercise. So the exercise he completed, exercise number 11, enjoys being bounced in hands and knees position, was followed the next week by the logical progression, which is number 12, initiates bouncing in hands and knees position. So you can see how one thing leads into another. And he started that on the 10th of June. Can you see that? So what was his total score for section C on the 10th of June? 5, yeah. He keeps the score for the exercise he's finished. The line is equivalent in value to whatever the final score was. He has to keep the score, because if he didn't, the graph would show progress as a drop. Does that make sense? The reason this is a good example is he got stuck on that exercise, number 12. He scored a 1 the first week, and then a 2, and then a 2 again, and a 2, and a 2. And the teacher has decided after 4 weeks, that appears to be as far as he can get with this exercise. We don't want him getting bored. Draw a line, move on. So we finish at 2, that's fine. So the next week he started exercise number 13, and he scored a 1 for it. So his total score for the 15th of July, when he started exercise 13, was what? 7. 1 for the exercise he scored this week, 2 for the one he finished with last week, 4 for the one he finished with a few weeks ago. So they always keep the score for the exercise they finished with, whatever that final score was, whether it's a 1, 2, 3 or 4. Yeah? I think once you've just read through the manual a few times, it will just sort of click into place. Later on in the manual, you've got the record sheets face to face with the indicators. It's okay, and it's recommended that you do photocopy out the book. So if you're using the Huddersfield Functional Index, it's okay to photocopy out the book, because then you can just sellotape those 2 pages together, have them on the end of the trampoline, and there is your class plan. Now let's see, you scored a 2 for that last week. Oh, that's worth a 3 this week. Put 3 down. It's just so quick and simple to keep the records. And of course, by photocopying, the backs of the pages are blank. So if you want to make any notes, you can just write them on the back of the page, can't you? So it is okay to photocopy out of the book. So that's the Huddersfield Functional Index. Head teachers tend to love this. Physiotherapists like it. Inspectors tend to like it. People that give grant aid like it. All because it shows evidence of outcomes, doesn't it? It's actual evidence. If someone says to you, well, how's he actually doing? You don't want to say, well, he's doing quite well. It's nice to say, well, look, here's his record sheets. This is what he's working on. Here are his scores. You can see his progression from week to week. This is what he had to do to get those scores. So it's evidence of outcomes, isn't it? So that's the Huddersfield Functional Index.